Good morning, America, and people outside of America. You're listening to and maybe watching the DMZ America podcast for the morning of Saturday, April 12th, 2025. Coming to you from the left, I'm editorial cartoonist Ted Rall.
And I am editorial cartoonist Scott Stantis, coming to you from the right. How's everyone doing? I hope they're doing great. We do have listeners outside the country, apparently. So
we do. I've been looking at those metrics. Apparently, we're big in Malta. As Malta goes. Malta.
This sounds like a long story. It will not be. I could probably go get it if I so choose, but I have the flag of Malta, of course. I collect flags and I have like 350 of them. And apparently when my daughter-in-law very graciously volunteered to catalog them for me, and did a Google spreadsheet and all that stuff. We dug the flag of Malta was one of the things. Ted,
sure.
The flag of Malta, if you notice, it's like half red, half white, and the white there's a crest with a cross in the corner and a circle.
I actually knew that. Yeah.
Well, my flag is a circle with squiggles. I'm not kidding. Apparently, it was done at some factory somewhere in Indonesia or China.
So in other words, you have the bullshit flag of Malta.
Oh yeah. It's from a distance. It looks like it.
Are you sure it's not like an opposition group, like the revolutionary,
the communist Maltans? Yes.
The merry government of exile of drunken Maltese.
It could be that, but it's my guess is. Do you remember when we were kids and before the internet, they had the World Almanac, and the World Almanac had color inserts.
I bought it every single year. Yes,
and it was
flags.
And it was the map of the world, different continents, and then they had 3 or 4 pages of flags. One of the reasons I fell in love with flags, and my guess is they had whatever factory produced this flag. They had that page.
They went by the World Almanac.
They blew it up, and what it was a squiggle. Yeah.
They were like, I mean, is anyone? What I love is the idea that they were like, how many? There was no one at the factory who thought, we're probably not going to sell any Maltese flags anyway.
No, but it makes me story makes me happy, which flies in the face of our topic for this podcast, which is ennui. Did you know? I've heard of this. I didn't know it was quantified though. That there is indeed in the United States and in the world, much of the Western world, a loneliness epidemic.
Mm-hmm.
Which astounds me. Let me ask you this, Ted.
Highlighted by the pandemic.
I think that's part. I think that's part of it, but I think that's a small part of it, and I'll tell you why. I think it's.
I'm not saying that it didn't exist before. I'm saying that it's something that we started paying attention to. The media started covering.
We were on the way. I just finished reading an article this morning about how Gen Zs are being fired left and right.
And many of them. It's like welcome to our world, Gen Z.
Gen Z much more and at a much earlier age because they're awful. Because they're hard to work with, they're uncommunicative. They don't know how to have a conversation with a live human being. And I mean, it's one of the reasons I left the Chicago Tribune full time and transitioned to freelance with them, is because many of the new reporters, you'd go into the break room, and especially the men. The women would at least have the good grace to sneer at you, but the guys would just. True story. I walked into the break room. I said, "Hey, how's it going?" A guy's on his phone. He looks up at me, and it's like I pulled a gun on him. He goes,
he was scared. What do you want?
He literally ran away. He looked like. Do you remember that meme that was popular prior to the pandemic of the Gen Zer in the onesie, the guy, and he's drinking a big cup of tea, clearly at his mother's house. This is what this guy. I mean, the stereotypicalness of this. And my point is, the reason I bring this up is. The loneliness and the depression you and I talked about masculinity a couple of podcasts ago and what that means and who should quantify it, who should demonstrate what it is. We've lost the ability in the normal social intercourse of how to perform, how to talk to somebody else who's in the room and to actually enjoy it. Ted, I've had friends who lived in New York City. who said that was one of the loneliest periods of their life.
Oh, sure.
Now,
Well, that's well known. New York is a,
I was like,
it's that alone in a crowd thing.
let's start with that because I've been to New York. I'm a social guy. I'm kind of like, hey, I'm Scott, woohoo! And, I'll walk up to anybody. I'll actually talk to people on the train and got a smile from someone once. Not this last trip because it's scary time in New York City.
Oh, my God.
But
Did you hear about the corpse fucker?
Oh, dear God.
The NYPD is currently on the lookout for a man who, in a downtown financial district subway station, the Whitehall station on the R to be specific, a stone's throw away from the Staten Island ferry terminal and Wall Street. He basically found a guy unconscious or dead, robbed him, and then decided on the subway, and then decided to fuck
This
him.
is on a subway train. This isn't like a dark, dank corner
on
somewhere.
the train. On the train. It's all caught on surveillance video, and basically he spent more time, making sweet love to this dead man's corpse than a lot of husbands do to their wives. Anyway, the point is he spent an hour and a half or something like that, and nothing happened. No one interfered. No one shot him. Nothing happened. Anyway.
Well, at least he wasn't looking at his screen.
Hey, he was looking for connection.
So I stand corrected.
Looking for love in all the wrong places.
Oh my God, I had not heard.
I could do this all day.
Well, okay, Ted. Before we get back to the meat of the conversation, what would you have done? I don't know what I got to be honest. I took the L a lot in Chicago, which is obviously a subway system. If I saw someone
corpse fucking,
well, presumably, I'm going to presume for a moment that the guy was just passed out. He was drunk or stoned, and he was passed out on the train. What would you do? I'm not sure I would. First of all, I'd be so shocked. I don't know. I'd be mortified.
Well, whether the victim was, I'd say, look, even if you have two people having sex on the subway, let's say it's like, no.
It's beautiful.
Beautiful, young, married, in love couple, completely sanctioned by the state, but they're having
in
sex
the church.
I'm calling 911.
Really?
And if I see a cop, I'm telling them,
would a cop show up? I mean,
look for a cop because that's fucked up.
In New York, would a cop show up?
Eventually,
I bet the fucking would get them to show up.
I think that's right.
Yeah. That's where they go. Well, that's okay.
Different.
Yeah, okay, I got to see this.
Yeah,
but how can
when you talk to cops, they have so many calls that are the same, of domestic violence or whatever. They love something new. Anything new is exciting to them. So, and by the way, this is a reminder that, okay, so New York is a city where cops actually have something to do. They don't need to arrest you for jaywalking. They have corpse fuckers to chase.
I don't know if you chase them though, do you? Because
you can just okay. So I'm the lefty here. I say if they just shoot him like a dog, that's fine, no problem.
Yeah, I'm probably with you on that one. But getting back to my original question, which was not about corpse fucking, but it was about how can you be lonely? How could you be lonely? And this is prior to the internet and smartphones and all that. How are you lonely in New York City? I mean, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of bars, there's a lot of things going on.
Well, it's true. I mean, look, you can definitely find connection in New York City, but I think, New York is one of those cities where you I'd say LA is similar. It's like when you have to pick the lock, you have to figure it out. And it's like, if you come in and you're an outsider and you're a tourist, you haven't spent a lot of time here, it's hard to figure out. Everyone seems like flat affect. They're not, they're not staring at you. Nobody's paying it, It's off-putting. So, you can't be like, well, hi, golly, it's so nice to see you. I mean, although, frankly, if you do that, a lot of New Yorkers will be very charmed by it. And they may take you in and say, yeah, let's get a drink, because it's so refreshing. They're not used to it. And they like it. So I think you could go in with a big goofy grin into a bar in Midtown Manhattan and make new friends right there and then. I really do think that. But if you're a little shy, you might not do that. But there's certain bars are better than others for that. There's like, and then if you choose a neighborhood bar, like I have a great neighborhood bar right around the corner from my house.
Yeah,
it's like,
you do.
But it's like, and it's one of those like, everybody knows your name. It's great. And everybody's welcome. And everyone's friendly. It doesn't matter. But there's others bars like in Boston that are like that, neighborhood bars, but they're cliquey. And it's
God.
Like, who the
I
fuck
almost got into, I don't get into, I'm a grown man. I don't get into fights. Grown men don't get into fights. That's idiotic. Okay. But I was in Quincy with my brother. We went to an Irish bar and we started playing darts. And this guy said, "Can I play winner?" And I beat my brother, so that he plays me. And I don't know what it was, Ted. I had a hot hand. I mean, I couldn't miss. And this guy is getting progressively madder and madder, and finally jumps in my face and like shoves me and says, "Let's go outside." I'm like, and it's important to note, no money was involved in this. No drinks.
You're a dart hustler, huh?
For which, not a good one. I kind of missed a step in that there was no money on the table. And my brother had to jump in, and my brother, who does like fighting, scared the shit out of this guy. Yeah. So you're right about Boston, but in New York, I just, when we went there, Janine and I, my wife and I went there the first time in the early 80s when it really had a bad rep, right?
Well, for good reason. Yeah.
And now it has a sterling one, but it went through a golden
period. It has
period.
The same exact rep. It's the 80s again. With less graffiti, but still.
Fair point. But we were on a corner a couple times, kind of looking around, clearly mystified. And we had strangers stop and ask, "What are you looking for?" And we said, "We're looking for the Pan Am building where United Media used to be," or something like that. And they say, "Okay, yeah, I'll show you. Walk this way. Walk 4 blocks this way."
That's building for people who've been here more recently. Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, I can't. God damn, I'm old. So I guess that again, it's a quandary for me how people get lonely, because if you don't want to be lonely, there are places to not be lonely, and it's easy. And it's easy for me, maybe not for others. But we have a new generation now with Gen Z, that has no social skills, and I do think that COVID, let's face it, they had 2 years of social, really vital parts of their lives where they did not learn social skills. They were trapped at home because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
But I think that's part and parcel to the ennui that now permeates not just the country. Ted, you know better than I do. You have much more international friends. Does the ennui, does that permeate Clovis? I see he is piping in.
Clovis is suffering from cat ennui.
Ah, mad. Anyway, poor chat.
Because the heater's off and it's cold.
So what? Why is the heat off?
Oh, so if New York is the loneliest city, April is the coldest month in New York because the landlords turn off the heat because they can after April 1st, I think it is. But it's still, I don't know, it's like 42 outside. So it's ironic. You're going to be inside sweating like a pig in January and freezing your ass off in April. It's very strange.
That was true in Chicago. We had an apartment where it was built in the 70s, so it had a communal cooling system, and they wouldn't turn the chiller on until there were like 3 or 4 days in a row that were cold, that were hot. Well, and it's St. Patty's Day one year, it was 85 degrees. Now, you were in my apartment in Chicago. It looked down Hubbard Street, which has many, 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 many bars. So many bars that the streets were literally chock full of human beings. And so I called Janine and she could not hear me on the phone. Bear in mind, I lived on the 20th floor.
Wow.
But I know you're being shocked.
Does vary remarkably. I mean, I remember the first time I visited the Empire State Building observation deck, and I guess you're on 102nd floor, and you can hear people talking on 34th
It's
Street.
Weird.
It's the most incredible thing.
When we moved to Chicago from, humble, Birmingham, Alabama, we got an apartment on the 20th floor and just assumed, oh God, you're not going to be able to hear anything. Oh, contraire mon frere. At 2:30 in the morning, you'd hear the drunks.
Yeah. It's
Again,
true. It's true about urban living. So, but I mean, so Scott, we've
let's
had
take
this.
this to. I
Let's
want to dovetail
go
it
ahead.
into. We're also to have a
Right.
broader discussion about 21st century economics, and is the 21st century just soul crushing? And I'd say the first 25 years, yep.
Well,
Oh,
so
except for
yeah,
Clovis. Clovis gives us all hope for the future. Thank
that's
you,
true.
Clovis.
Well, he will
Thank
be
you
our
for.
next. He will be taking over and cleaning up Trump's mess. Um,
Oh, is that right? He'll be eating Trump's eyeballs when they find him
well,
dead in the Oval
that's
Office.
correct. So, but let's talk about the. I mean, what do you? So, why don't we say what is like what do you mean by the 21st century economy? Because I mean, let's define things.
Well, I think, and here's where I know listeners of our podcast kind of like are hoping for, firebrands screaming at each other from the left and from the right. And that's not what we are at all. I see Ted's point. He sees my point, but we're about to enter waters where we strongly disagree. So stay tuned, kids. But I would say that the first 25 years of the 21st century economics have been as simple. I've been giving this a lot of thought, obviously, but oligarch is the only way I can put it. Not just in Russia, but here too, where you have the moneyed classes. Or you look at the wealth that has been accrued over the last 25 years. Hasn't come to you, Ted. Hasn't come to me. Hasn't come to middle class. Hasn't come to the poor. It's gone to the extremely wealthy. We have an economy now in cahoots with the government to do nothing but enrich the very, very, very rich. And that's the economy we're living in. And the rest of it is scraps for assholes like you and me to try to scrape up and live on. We don't have.
Oligarchs are literally in the government now. I mean, Donald Trump is
Yes.
an oligarch. Elon Musk is the
Oh,
first or second
yeah.
richest man on earth, supposedly. These things nobody really knows.
On paper, but yeah.
Yeah, on paper. Not poor, a very rich guy. I mean, look, I don't want to get into all. Normally, we're good at the history stuff. I would just sort of say, look, we know that there's been increasing disparity of wealth and income in this country going back to the end of the Vietnam War. And if you look at, increases in productivity, those have, in other words, like more efficiency, the amount of GDP that each worker produces. Those profits have been devolving increasingly to the top 1% and not really to anybody else. Everyone's wages are pretty much frozen in the middle class and working class.
Which means they've gone down.
Which means effectively, because we're, of course, there's greater efficiencies due to computers and stuff. Each human being, each worker produces more. So, but anyway, we can get into all that economic history, but I think, that's another show for another time. I think the interesting question, and this was your topic, right, that you suggested, and I love it, is, what about the psychological impact
huge.
of an economy? I mean, let's talk about what this economy looks like. First of all, it's an economy where fewer people are participating. The worker participation rate has been steadily on the decline throughout our lives, which means that a lot of people just can't find a place for themselves. They look for work, and they just can't find something or there's just not enough room. So effectively, even if the unemployment rate were to remain exactly flat, the real unemployment rate is dropping. The employment rate is dropping because there's fewer people working who are even counted as unemployed or as part of the workforce. Right now, about 2 out of 3 Americans are in the workforce who are eligible to be. The other third are scraping by. They're living off their spouse or relatives or welfare or scrounging on odd jobs, cash economy, or they're desperately poor. And if you drive around this country, you know that there's a lot of desperately poor people.
Yes, indeed.
And that seems to be getting worse and worse. Homelessness is way up. I mean, I've been writing about homelessness for my column for better part of 30 years. And there was kind of just a general flat number. 550,000 was sort of the number of homeless people in the United States pretty much for 15 years, every year. This year it went up to 770,000. So just in the last year, we saw a massive spike. Housing has become increasingly unaffordable, rent and purchasing. We have these
Yes.
giant corporations that are scooping up homes, even in places that used to be really affordable, like Newark, New Jersey. And they're buying these hedge funds are buying houses and then flipping them and turning them into rentals. And they're basically these are used to be family neighborhoods. They're not. They're either empty, but basically it's like a housing development in the city. It's just increasingly hard, right? And then I think hovering over all our heads is automation, robotics, and artificial intelligence, all threatening to and already costing a lot of jobs. Elon Musk has in the past, before he joined the Trump administration, recently 2-3 years ago, he was addressing this issue, and he said, Andrew Yang, you remember him, running the Democrat who ran for president. He was calling for a universal basic income of like $10,000 a year for every human being just for being alive. Elon Musk says that's not going to go far enough because subsistence is not enough, right? We have a consumer-based economy. So he's calling for a universal high income. In other words, maybe everybody gets $60,000 a year for staying at home. And there's still, I got to say, there's a lot of people who you're like, well, who would work? I would. If you said, Ted, I'll give you $60,000 a year to stay at home or $60,000 a year to work, I'd work. I like working. And it depends. Maybe I don't know asbestos removal, but I like working. And maybe I'd get to the point where I'm tired and I don't want to work anymore. But I don't think everyone would just sit at home like a slug. Some people would.
I think if you have like a 60,000 maybe, but let's say 45, where you could potentially kind of eke by, but there's motivation for you to work. There's motivation for you to add to your income somehow. But Ted, they're talking about a 30 with automation, which is killing jobs far faster than shipping them overseas. A permanent 30% unemployment. I mean, that's a big number. And what do you do with those people?
It's going to increase probably, right? And the thing is that a lot of the policies that are coming out of this White House that we're going to be living with for a long time are also going to accelerate that process. I don't want to editorialize about those. That's a different show.
Why not? It's in your job description.
I know, but because I really want to focus on the psychological factor here that no one talks about. And I think that's that's everyone's talking about like Trump this, Trump that, but let's talk about, and also this is just the latest iteration. It makes it seem like this is a Republican thing. It's not. I mean, this is a long-term trend under both parties. Yeah. And, this isn't really a political, this is about the way that as a society, we're configuring our economic system, which is looking increasingly like a third world economy rather than a developed world economy. And I think about a highly developed first world economy, like, in Scandinavia, where they basically have highly semi-socialized capitalism. So basically their policies are the most, you are guaranteed not to be homeless. You will, if you live in Iceland, you will never sleep on the street. No one does. It's not, they couldn't, it never breaks 32 degrees. So people, it's like, they're nice about it. They don't make you feel like you're an asshole because you're down and out. They give you money and you have enough to live. That's not true here. And so the rich they're surrounding themselves by armed guards in gated communities, and alarm systems and drones, and they're protecting themselves. We're not living. There's no sense that we're living in a communal society where we all care about what happens to our fellow citizens. I don't think that's the case. There's no sympathy here. I could name zillions of examples of that, but I think no one who's listening to us would disagree with that.
Well, and I would also say for those out there who are saying, "Oh, you guys are just a bunch of mamby-pamby bleeding hearts," let me just one of my favorite moments in The Big Short. The guys from the two younger guys who are shorting the market. And the character who's kind of mentoring them, they're high-fiving and like really excited. He says, stop it. He said, do you know what you've just done? He says, yeah, you've just bet against the American economic system. And they say, damn right we did. He goes, no, for every point that unemployment goes up, for every full point it goes up, 40,000 people die. I mean, that's a stone cold fact. Suicide, just exposure, 40,000 people per point. Now, do you really think that the people who are in charge of the Commerce Department, Labor Department, this administration, the House, the Senate give, and that's both sides of the aisle, give that much of a crap about those 40,000 souls who we lose when unemployment goes up? And it is going to be going up, by the way, because, well, the Trump economy is such that it is. The psychological impact of that, I mean, that alone just shows you the very stark number of the psychological impact of economics. I mean, you and I talk about economics a lot, and yeah, it can be very dry, maybe, and probably even boring. But honest to God, there is a human component to this that is being ignored, unreported. Ted, I mean, have you seen any reports on how you're just now starting to hear it because Donald Trump has fucked up the economy so badly? The NPRs and the New York Times can now write stories about, people are suffering under this economy. To your point, Ted, people have been suffering under this economy for a quarter century, if not more. And I would argue that probably back 75, I think that might be a little.
I mean, look, the American public, you and I have talked about how the 19th century was a time of great economic turmoil and very difficult.
Yes.
But like basically in our lifetimes, like for people our age, there's a mythology surrounding the post-World War II boom that basically, carried us through, and then kind of like then the Vietnam War was like a stick in the bicycle tire spokes, right? And it's not like the American economic engine came to a crashing halt in 1975, but it's like the glory days of like working class people being able to send their kids to college and buy a house and all that. That's, particularly white people, right?
That's when it started to erode. You're right.
And things start to, deindustrialization, something that the Trump administration, for better or for worse, is attempting to address the deindustrialization through tariffs. Right. I mean, it's like the thing is, we know what tariffs did to the securities markets. Right. You and I have talked about tariffs. We don't really think it's going to work this time. And it maybe it never worked, but it was definitely not going to work this time. Probably not. We could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But
you're not wrong.
But the point is, what's interesting is that this man was elected in 2016 and then again in 2024, in large part because he acknowledged that deindustrialization had left a lot of human and economic wreckage in its wake. Democrats did not acknowledge that as much, and so they've paid the price. I think we all agree that that's how they've lost their connection to the working class that used to be a major part of their coalition. So where do we go from here? The fact is, this is a major issue.
Yeah. And
there's probably, I don't know that the political system that we have can fix it. And I'm using the word can rather than wants to. I mean, I think if Donald Trump could snap his fingers and, reindustrialize the Midwest, he would. I don't think that he's lying about caring about that. And I think if there's this bunch of, I think Bernie Sanders would also want to bring jobs back, although maybe not as many dirty jobs, factory jobs, but he would want to increase employment. But I mean, we have this pay for work model, and it doesn't, if you just think about it, Scott, it doesn't really make sense if you have technological innovation and and efficiency per worker constantly generally improving over time, right? Like in fits and starts. It doesn't make sense to say in perpetuity, if for people to survive, they're going to have a job in this economy, because it doesn't stand to reason that the workforce is going to need to be as big over time. Like, if the population remains pretty much the same and that population keeps getting more efficient, it will keep producing more and more with a smaller and smaller workforce. It just doesn't make sense to say, okay, well, you need to keep doing things the way that like your grandfather did, because you can't, because like there's no room for you in this economy. And I think, there's who's willing to stand. I don't think politically in our political system, anyone can stand up and say, I will defend your right to not hold a job. And yet that's I think what we need, because the reality is not everyone can hold a job. So,
well, here's where the logical and the historic context comes into play, Ted. Looking at what's happening right now, looking at the economy right now, looking at and trends even before the stupid ass tariffs, you saw employment going down, you saw wages stagnant, and you saw pricing and the cost of living we touched on earlier skyrocketing. Not just housing, but I mean, you go out to eat, go buy groceries.